After 24 years of marriage, Celeste wanted one night of freedom with another man. Ronan warned her there would be consequences. She didn't listen. But what started as a betrayal turned into something far darker. And by the time she realized the truth, it was already too late. Ronan sat in his dimly lit living room, the weight of the day's exhaustion pressing against his shoulders. He barely looked up from his book when the door swung open. Celeste walked in, dropping her bag at the entrance, her expression unreadable. "You're late," Ronan said, placing the book aside. Celeste hesitated. She wasn't the woman he married. Not anymore. Something about her had changed in the last few months, an unsettling coldness in her eyes. "I need to talk to you," she said, sitting down across from him, fingers nervously tracing the edge of the coffee table. Ronan leaned forward, sensing the storm before it hit. "I'm listening." Celeste took a deep breath. "Ever since my diagnosis, my whole perspective on life has changed. I don't want to waste time anymore. I need to experience everything before it's too late." Ronan nodded slowly, understanding. He had been there every step of the way, through the treatments, the tears, the late-night hospital visits. He had fought for her when she was too weak to fight for herself. "You know I support you," he said softly. She gave a brief smile before her next words sliced through the air like a blade. "I want a hall pass." Ronan blinked. "Eh, what? A chance to be with someone else? Just once. I've only ever been with you, and I don't want to leave this world regretting what I never tried." Ronan felt the blood drain from his face. He stared at her, waiting for her to laugh, to say it was a joke. But Celeste only held his gaze, unwavering. "You're serious?" His voice was barely above a whisper. She nodded. "I need this, Ronan. I don't want to resent you for saying no." Ronan exhaled sharply, rubbing his temples. "Resent me? For being faithful to you all these years?" Celeste sighed. "It's not about that. It's about me. About what I need." Ronan clenched his fists. A deep rage bubbled beneath his skin, but he forced himself to stay calm. "Who is it?" "A man from work. He's leaving the company. I'll never see him again." "Perfect," Ronan scoffed. "So I'm just supposed to smile and nod while you screw some guy for closure? You think we'll go back to normal after this?" Celeste looked away. "I think we can move past it." Ronan's jaw tightened. For the first time in 20 years, he looked at his wife and saw a stranger. And deep inside, something dark and violent stirred. The silence between them stretched unbearably long. Ronan could hear the clock ticking, the distant hum of the refrigerator, the shallow breaths Celeste took as she waited for his answer. "You already made up your mind," he finally said, voice eerily calm. "You didn't come here to ask. You came here to tell me." Celeste didn't deny it. "I was hoping you'd understand." Ronan laughed, but there was no humor in it, just a hollow, bitter sound. He stood up, towering over her, his shadow swallowing the dim glow of the lamp. "Understand? You're asking me to sit here like a goddamn idiot while you walk out that door to spread your legs for another man." His voice was low, dangerous. Celeste flinched, but didn't back down. "It's just one night, Ronan." "One night," he echoed, shaking his head. "And you expect me to just wait here for you? Welcome you back like nothing happened?" Celeste swallowed. "I don't want to fight. I just need you to trust that this won't change anything between us." "Trust," he repeated, the word tasting like poison on his tongue. "You're asking me to trust you while you betray me." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "I never said betray." Ronan's hand slammed against the wall beside her, making her jump. "Call it whatever the hell you want, Celeste. But after tonight, you're not my wife anymore." A flicker of doubt crossed her face. "Ronan, please. You already chose, didn't you?" His voice was deathly quiet now. "Then don't ask me for my blessing. Just go." Celeste hesitated, but then she stood. She picked up her bag and turned toward the door. For a brief moment, she looked over her shoulder, as if waiting for him to stop her. Ronan didn't move. He just watched as his wife walked out into the night, out of their home, out of their marriage, out of his life. Something inside him snapped. And he realized then, this wasn't going to end the way she thought it would. Ronan sat in the dark, his fingers drumming against the armrest of his chair. The house felt different now, emptier, colder. His eyes flicked to the clock. 10:47 p.m. She was out there, with him. Images swam in his mind, violent and unrelenting. Celeste's hands on another man, her lips pressed against his. Her body, his body, moving together in ways Ronan couldn't stomach. He clenched his jaw. "No." She thought this was just a hall pass. A harmless, selfish indulgence. A moment of pleasure that would fade into the past. But she had no idea what she had unleashed. Ronan stood, his movements eerily slow. He grabbed his jacket, slipped on his boots, and reached for the item he hadn't touched in years, the black-handled knife tucked away in the drawer. He wasn't thinking anymore. Or maybe he was, just not like a rational man. This wasn't jealousy. This wasn't heartbreak. This was justice. By the time he reached the bar where her coworkers had gathered, the crowd had thinned. He parked across the street, waiting, watching. He knew she was still inside. He could feel it. Minutes stretched like hours. Then, finally, the door swung open. Ronan's breath stilled. There she was. Celeste stepped out, her hand curled around another man's arm, his arm. The man was older than Ronan expected, short and round, his receding hairline glistening under the streetlights. Ronan almost laughed. She destroyed their marriage for this? But the laughter never came. Celeste was smiling. Smiling in a way she hadn't in years. A different kind of happiness, a different kind of freedom. And she didn't even glance over her shoulder as she walked toward the hotel with her new lover. Ronan's grip on the steering wheel tightened. His vision darkened. She thought this was just another night. She had no idea it would be her last. Ronan moved like a shadow, his steps measured, his breath slow. The night air was cool against his skin, but inside, he burned. He followed at a distance, his body thrumming with quiet rage as Celeste and her lover walked toward the hotel entrance. Their laughter echoed in the empty street. The sound made his stomach churn. She was happy, not guilty, not regretful, just happy. Ronan clenched his fists so hard his nails dug into his palm. They reached the hotel doors. Celeste didn't hesitate. She chose this. She walked inside with him. Ronan watched the doors swing shut, his mind a storm of thoughts. She thinks she gets to come home after this. She thinks she gets to pretend this never happened. No, she would pay. His feet carried him forward before he even realized he was moving. He entered the lobby, keeping his head down, his hood pulled up. The receptionist barely glanced at him. The elevator dinged. He turned just in time to see Celeste and the man step inside. The doors began to close. Ronan's heart slammed against his ribs. He caught a glimpse of her face one last time before the doors shut completely. That was all he needed. He approached the desk, forcing his expression into something neutral. "Hey," he said, sliding a folded bill toward the receptionist. "My wife forgot her key." The man barely looked up. "Name?" "Celeste Vaughn." Clicking away at the keyboard, the receptionist gave a nod. "Room 714. Ronan's stomach tightened. 7th floor. Last night of her life. He pocketed the key card and made his way to the elevator, his pulse steady, his mind clear. Ding. The doors opened. He stepped in. Floor 7. The ride up was silent. When the doors slid open, the hallway stretched before him, eerily quiet. Room numbers glowed softly under dim lights. 710. 712. 714. Ronan stopped at the door. His grip tightened around the knife in his pocket. A muffled laugh came from inside. His vision blurred with rage. He slid the key card through the lock. The light flashed green. He turned the handle and stepped inside. The door swung open without a sound. Ronan stepped inside, his pulse steady, his grip tightening around the knife in his pocket. The room was dimly lit by a single bedside lamp, casting long shadows against the walls. The air was thick with the scent of alcohol and perfume. Then he saw them. Celeste straddled the man, her silk dress sliding off her shoulders. Their bodies tangled together on the bed. She didn't even notice him at first, too lost in her betrayal. Ronan's chest rose and fell with slow, controlled breaths. "She doesn't know I'm here." "Not yet." Then the man saw him. His eyes widened in horror, his mouth opening to scream. Too late. Ronan lunged. The knife sank deep into flesh, silencing the scream before it ever left his throat. The man gasped, his hands clawing at Ronan's wrist, but the fight left him almost instantly. Blood spilled across the sheets, soaking the fabric beneath him. Celeste screamed. She scrambled off the bed, her body trembling. "Ronan, what the hell?" Her voice broke. Her hands were slick with the other man's blood. She stared at them, realization dawning in her wide, terrified eyes. "You thought you could walk away from this?" Ronan's voice was eerily calm. "That I would just let you come home like nothing happened?" Celeste shook her head violently, pressing herself against the wall. I made a mistake. No. Ronan stepped closer, his voice a whisper. You made a choice. Her breath came in ragged sobs. Please, please, Ronan, He grabbed her by the throat. Celeste gasped, her nails digging into his arm as he lifted her from the floor. Her legs kicked, her body twisting as she fought for air. Was it worth it? Ronan murmured, his grip tightening. Did he make you feel alive? Tears streamed down her face. She couldn't answer. The struggle weakened. Her kicks became weaker. Her nails stopped clawing. Then, a pounding on the door. Hotel security. A voice called from the other side. Open up now. Ronan's head snapped toward the door. The moment of distraction was all Celeste needed. She kicked him in the stomach, sending him stumbling back. She collapsed onto the floor, choking, gasping for air. Ronan turned to her, but the pounding on the door grew louder. He didn't have time. With one last look at her broken, terrified face, he turned and bolted for the window. With a crash, he disappeared into the night. Ronan hit the alley pavement with a bone-rattling thud, the impact jolting through his body. Pain flared up his side, but he barely registered it. He forced himself to move, to run, his breath coming in sharp bursts as he vanished into the darkness. Behind him, sirens wailed. Hotel security had likely kicked down the door by now. They'd find the blood-drenched sheets, the gasping, sobbing woman, and the cooling corpse of the man who ruined everything. But they wouldn't find Ronan. Not yet. He had planned for this. The alley emptied into a side street, and a black car sat waiting at the curb. He yanked open the door and slid inside. The driver, a man in his late 50s with hollow eyes and a scar running down his jaw, didn't speak, just stepped on the gas. Clean job, the driver finally asked after a few blocks. Ronan wiped the blood from his fingers. Not clean enough. The man nodded as if he expected that answer. You're going to need to disappear for a while. Ronan exhaled slowly. I know. For 20 years, he had built a life. A family. He had done everything right. And for what? To be tossed aside like nothing? No. Celeste had made her choice. And so had he. The city blurred past as they headed toward the outskirts, toward an old safe house where no one would look for him. Ronan leaned back against the seat, closing his eyes. Maybe one day, when the world had forgotten his name, he'd start over. Maybe. But for now, there was only silence. And the scent of blood still clinging to his hands. The end.